She took my hand before he did. And in that moment I stopped pretending I didn't want her to. I was supposed to be his. That was the unspoken arrangement. I was the friend, the loyal one, the constant shadow in his orbit. We had danced around the idea of something more for months, years even. Close enough to taste it, far enough to keep the illusion alive. Everyone saw it coming. Even me. But she moved first. We were at his lake house for the weekend. A late summer trip meant for sunsets, cold drinks, and the ache of things unspoken. He brought her along. Said she was just a friend from work, but the way he looked at her said otherwise. I wasn't sure if I was jealous of her, or him. She was magnetic. The kind of woman who walks into a room and shifts the temperature without trying. Her voice was soft but steady, her laugh like velvet sliding across bare skin. She wore a linen shirt unbuttoned just enough to hint, denim shorts that clung like a secret, and no shoes. Just painted toes and an unapologetic ease. The first night was harmless. Drinks on the dock, music humming low. His arm brushing mine just enough to remind me I was still his maybe. But she sat too close. Her knee touched his. Her eyes stayed too long. I noticed. I pretended not to. By the second night, the air had thickened. A storm was flirting with the horizon, and so were we. The four of us, me, him, her, and a mutual friend, were playing cards in the living room. The lights were dim, the music a slow heartbeat. She sat beside me this time. Her perfume was something floral and defiant. I felt her breath on my shoulder when she laughed. He was losing interest in the game. She wasn't. Her hand brushed mine under the table. First I thought it was an accident. I didn't move. Then she did it again. Slower. Intentional. Her fingers grazed the inside of my wrist like she was tracing a thought she hadn't dared speak. I didn't look at her. I didn't have to. I felt the smile in her fingertips. He said something, probably a joke, and everyone laughed. I laughed too, but I didn't hear it. Because in that instant, her pinky curled around mine. And I let it. She didn't let go. There was a heat in my chest I couldn't explain. A rush of blood that made everything louder. The music, the rain starting to tap against the windows, the way her thigh casually pressed against mine. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. I was waiting for him to notice. Waiting for him to claim me, to do something, say something, make this confusion stop. Instead, she took my hand. Fully. She laced her fingers with mine beneath the table, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she had every right to. My heart stopped pretending. Her palm was warm. Soft. Certain. Her thumb moved just enough to make me ache. I turned my head finally to look at her. Her eyes met mine. And she smiled. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't look away. Not even when he glanced over mid-laugh. His eyes flitting between us like he sensed something was off. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe that was just my guilt. Burning like a secret against her palm. But she held on like we weren't doing anything wrong. Like her hand belonged in mine. My pulse was in my throat. Every nerve in my body had leaned toward her before I gave it permission. I could feel the shape of her fingers pressing into mine. Not hard, not aggressive. Just there. Present. Like a question she already knew the answer to. I wanted to let go. I didn't. The game ended eventually. Someone won, someone groaned. I didn't care. All I could think about was the slow drag of her thumb against my skin. How it made me feel like I was unraveling without even moving. When we stood, her hand slipped from mine like silk. No one noticed. Except me. We wandered into the kitchen for more drinks. He stayed back talking to the others and she followed me. Casually, like we were just two friends sneaking a refill. The light in the kitchen was warmer, softer. It made her skin glow in this surreal, honeyed way. I couldn't meet her eyes at first. I was afraid of what they might say. But then she leaned against the counter, tilting her head, watching me pour wine like it was something intimate. "You okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the question. It was how she asked it, like she already knew I wasn't. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." She smiled. That smile again. Like she could see straight through me. Like she enjoyed watching me pretend. "You're different," she said. "Different how?" She shrugged, her gaze dropping briefly to my lips before lifting again. "You don't chase attention. But it finds you anyway." I didn't know what to say to that. so I said nothing. Just handed her the glass of wine, careful not to touch her fingers. She touched mine anyway. A feather-light graze, deliberate. It sent a shiver through me so sharp I almost dropped the bottle. My breath caught and she saw it. Of course she saw it. That was the thing about her. She missed nothing. Before I could say anything, he walked in. "Hey, you guys coming back?" His tone was casual, but his eyes flicked between us. The space between our bodies. Her hand still lingering on the counter, too close to mine. I stepped back instinctively. Too fast. He noticed. She didn't flinch. "Yeah," she said easily, brushing past me. "Just grabbing wine." Her shoulder touched mine as she passed. Not an accident. He waited for me to follow. I did eventually, but not before taking a deep breath I didn't want to need. The rest of the night blurred. Music. Laughter. His arm slung lazily around my shoulder on the couch. But it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. Not after the way her fingers had curled around mine like a secret. Because now, every time he touched me, all I could feel was her. And she knew it. Because later that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was wrapped in silence, there was a knock on my door. Soft. 2 taps. Then nothing. I opened it. And there she was. Barefoot. Hair down. Eyes dark and unblinking. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. She stepped inside. And I let her. She didn't wait for permission. She just walked in slow, silent, like she belonged in that room, like she belonged there in that moment with me. The door clicked shut behind her. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air between us was a living thing. Charged. Too thick to breathe, too heavy to ignore. The sound of her bare feet on the wooden floor felt louder than it should have. Every tiny movement suddenly meant everything. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She just stood there watching me, one arm crossing over her chest, fingers brushing the hem of that impossibly soft shirt she always wore half undone. The moonlight spilling in from the window painted her in silver and shadow, and God, she was beautiful in the kind of way that felt dangerous. "You're not going to ask what I'm doing here," she finally said. Her voice was calm, almost playful. I swallowed. "Do I want to know?" She smiled. A little crooked. A little wicked. "No." There was a heartbeat of silence. Then another. And then she moved just 2 slow steps closer. Not enough to touch me, but enough to make my skin ache for it. I could feel the heat of her even from that distance. My heart was beating too hard, too fast. Every instinct in me was screaming this is wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable. "You're not what I expected," she said softly, eyes locked on mine. "What did you expect?" She tilted her head. "I thought you'd be like the others. Trying too hard. Loud. Needy. And I'm not." "No," she said, closing the last bit of distance. "You're worse." Her fingers lifted. Not touching me, just hovering. Like she wanted to memorize my shape without leaving evidence. My skin buzzed under the attention even without contact. She looked at me the way someone looks at a flame they know will burn them, but can't stop reaching for. "You want him," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. She stepped closer still. So close that her breath warmed the hollow of my throat. "But you want me too," she added. Still no question. Just a soft, devastating truth. I looked at her then, really looked. Her lips parted just slightly. Her chest rising and falling too quickly. She was nervous but not uncertain. Her hand lifted to my arm, fingertips barely grazing the fabric of my shirt. A touch so delicate, it felt like it came from inside my own body. I whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing." She leaned in, lips close enough to brush my cheek if I turned a fraction. "Neither do I," she breathed. "That's what makes it dangerous." Her hand slid down my arm, slow burning until her fingers found mine again. Just like before under the table. Only now there were no witnesses. No rules. No illusions. She laced her fingers through mine. And held. "You can stop this," she said. I didn't move. "I should." Her gaze flicked down to my lips, then back to my eyes. "But you won't." The air cracked. I was weightless. And falling. She leaned in, not kissing, not touching, just letting her presence undo me. But then, there was a knock on the door. One hard, impatient knock. And his voice. You up? My heart stopped. Her eyes met mine wide now, but not with fear, with curiosity. What are you going to do? She whispered. And suddenly I wasn't sure what scared me more. Him standing outside that door. Or the fact that I didn't want her to leave. My breath hitched. His voice still echoed behind the door, but it felt like it belonged to another world. One where things were still simple. One where I was still his maybe, and she was just a guest in the background. But she wasn't background anymore. She was right here. Fingers wrapped around mine, breath soft against my jaw. Gaze steady like she wasn't afraid of being caught. I was. He knocked again, this time lighter. You okay? My mouth opened. Nothing came out. She squeezed my hand gently, anchoring me in the moment. Not pleading. Not begging. Just holding me there. Like she was saying, whatever you choose, I'll understand. I slipped my hand out of hers. And instantly missed the way it felt to be held by someone who saw me. Yeah, I called out, my voice cracking slightly. Just give me a sec. Silence. Then footsteps fading down the hall. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. The guilt was molten in my chest, crawling beneath my skin. But there was something else too. Regret, maybe. Or confusion. Or a desire I hadn't been brave enough to name. When I finally looked at her, she was leaning against the wall now, arms folded, head tilted, waiting. She wasn't mad. She wasn't even disappointed. She was calm, watching me with those maddening eyes that seemed to read the things I couldn't say. I panicked, I whispered. I noticed, she said, lips curving into the faintest smirk. It was cute. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What are we doing? She shrugged. Nothing. Yet. That word landed like a heartbeat. Then she walked toward me again, slow, unhurried, like she wanted me to have time to change my mind. Her fingers brushed my wrist as she passed, soft as breath, and I let her. She reached the door and paused with her hand on the knob. I'm not trying to take something that isn't mine, she said, voice low. Then what are you trying to do? She turned slightly, the corner of her mouth lifting. Just showing you something you've been pretending not to want. And with that, she slipped out into the hall, leaving the door half open. And me half undone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence, every inch of me awake. I could still feel her hand on mine. Still smell her on my shirt. Still hear the question in her voice when she asked, what are you going to do? I had no answer. The next morning, everything felt too bright. He was already in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. Like the floor beneath my world hadn't shifted. He smiled when he saw me and handed me a mug. Sleep okay? I nodded. He leaned in, kissed my cheek lightly, something he'd never done before, and turned back to the stove. And I stood there frozen, holding the mug like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. She walked in a moment later. Hair still messy from sleep. That same effortless glow. She glanced at me once, then smiled at him. Then walked past us both without a word. And just like that, everything was normal. Except it wasn't. Because under the table, out of sight, her foot brushed mine. Just once. Light. Intentional. And suddenly I realized. This wasn't over. It had just begun. I thought I could ignore it. I told myself that. That I could pretend the night before didn't happen. That her touch hadn't lit something in me I didn't know how to put out. That he was still the one I wanted. But I lied. Because every time she walked into the room, my body betrayed me. My eyes found her without permission. My skin remembered her even when she didn't touch me. And when she did, even the smallest glance, the briefest contact, it was like my breath forgot how to behave. The worst part? She knew. She moved through that house like she knew exactly how far she could push me without breaking the illusion. She never crossed the line again, not physically. Not where anyone could see. But her words. Her glances. The way she leaned in just a little too close when she spoke to me in the kitchen, or brushed past me in the hallway like space wasn't a thing that mattered between us. It was constant. Torturously, deliciously constant. And he was oblivious. Or maybe he was choosing not to see it. Maybe it was easier for him to believe we were just two women figuring out how to share a long weekend in the same house. But it didn't feel shared. It felt like a quiet battle neither of us wanted to win. One afternoon while he was out getting more drinks with the others, she and I stayed behind. She said she was tired. I said I had a headache. But the truth was we couldn't keep pretending in front of everyone anymore. We needed air. Space. Something. We sat out on the dock, feet dangling just above the water, the sun painting golden freckles on her thighs. She was quiet at first, letting the silence breathe between us. It was different without him there. More dangerous. More honest. I keep thinking about that night, she said eventually. My stomach tightened. I do too, I admitted. She glanced at me. You haven't said anything. I don't know what to say. Say what you want. I looked out at the lake, so still, so calm. I envied it. I felt anything but calm. I want him, I whispered. I've wanted to for so long. But you don't. I hesitated. Not in the way I thought. She nodded slowly, her foot making lazy circles in the water. That's the thing about desire. It doesn't ask permission. It just shows up and ruins everything. There was a beat of silence. And then she added, or makes everything real. I turned to her then, and she was already watching me. That same unreadable look. The one that felt like a dare. And before I could speak, she leaned in just slightly, just enough to feel the shift in the air. Her voice dropped low. Have you ever wanted something you weren't supposed to want? My chest ached with how badly I wanted to say yes. I didn't say anything. But I didn't need to. Because her fingers found mine again. Not hidden this time. Right there in the sunlight. Bold. Open. She didn't look away. And this time, I didn't let go. Not even when we heard the car pulling back into the driveway. Not even when we heard his laugh across the yard. We just sat there. Quiet. Connected. Knowing we were seconds away from slipping back into the roles we were supposed to play, the performance, the smiles, the lies. But in that moment, we were something else. Something real. And the look in her eyes told me. She wasn't done. That night everything felt too still. Like the house was holding its breath. Dinner had been normal, or at least it was supposed to be. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone putting on a playlist that buzzed low in the background. He sat beside me, shoulder grazing mine, his hand warm on my thigh. He was present, sweet, even charming. But my mind wasn't on him. It was on her across the table. The way she looked at me when no one else was watching. The way her tongue swept slowly across her lower lip after sipping her wine. And her eyes locked on mine, daring me not to follow the movement. She never said much. That was her power. She didn't need to. She just existed in a way that made it impossible for me to forget her. Even when I was supposed to be wrapped in someone else's attention. He leaned in to whisper something funny. I smiled. But my heart was already somewhere else. Later, after everyone went to bed and the house sank back into silence, I stayed up, sitting at the edge of my bed with the door cracked open. My skin was buzzing with the kind of restless energy that had nowhere to go. A slow, deep ache building behind my ribs. I wasn't waiting for her. That's what I told myself. But then I heard it, footsteps in the hallway. Bare. Familiar. And a soft knock. This time she didn't wait to be invited. She stepped in, quietly closing the door behind her. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. The space between us was already heavy with everything we weren't allowed to say. She crossed the room in a few slow steps, stopped in front of me and just stood there letting the quiet stretch. I had a dream about you, she whispered. My breath caught. Was I in trouble? She smiled. No. But you were making some very questionable choices. Like what? She leaned in. Like letting me do this. Her fingers brushed my knee light, hesitant but full of meaning. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. My skin burned beneath her touch. She let her hand rest there for a moment before sliding it higher. Just a breath, just enough. And still no words. Just breath. She sat beside me then, close enough that our thighs touched. Her shoulder brushed mine as she leaned down, fingers toying with the hem of my sleep shirt. Her voice dropped lower. Can I ask you something? I nodded barely. She looked up at me, her lips so close to my ear it made me shiver. When you're with him, do you think about me? My whole body went still. The question shouldn't have hit me the way it did, but it split me open. Because the truth was raw. Shameful. Magnetic. Yes, I whispered. And there it was, the shift. Her hand stilled, her gaze sharpened. I saw it flash in her eyes, that knowing, hungry glint. Not lust. Something deeper. Something like claiming. She leaned in just an inch more. Tell me what you think about. Her words melted against my skin. My throat tightened. I think about how you look at me, like you already know what I want, before I do. She smiled. Slow. Dangerous. I do. Her hand moved, not fast, not greedy, but certain. She let her fingers trail over my wrist, tracing veins, reading secrets. And then, a sound, a creak. From the hallway. We froze. Both of us. Then a voice, his voice low and muffled, talking to someone down the hall. Not coming closer. Just passing by. But it was enough. Enough to make her pull back, just barely. Enough to make me realize this wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. And it was spiraling towards something neither of us could undo. She looked at me, a breath from my lips, and whispered, "Come to me. Tonight. When he's asleep." Then she slipped out the door, leaving nothing behind but heat. And a choice I wasn't sure I had the strength not to make. The house was asleep. Or at least I told myself it was. I waited in bed, lights off, heart thudding like a second clock on the nightstand. I could hear the wind outside brushing leaves across the windows. I could hear someone breathing in the next room. Steady, deep, unbothered. He was asleep. And I wasn't. I watched the digital clock tick past midnight. Then 10 minutes more. My hand hovered above the blanket, fingers twitching like they already knew what they were about to do. I got up. Quiet. Barefoot. Every step a betrayal wrapped in silk. The hallway was dark. Shadows long and waiting. My pulse was louder than my footsteps, and I half expected the walls to whisper, "Don't do it," as I passed. But the moment I reached her door, I didn't hesitate. Because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. About finally stepping into something I had wanted for too long and been too afraid to name. I touched the doorknob. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. I pushed the door open. And there she was. Standing by the window, bathed in moonlight, like she'd been waiting, like she knew I'd come. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just turned slowly and looked at me like I was the answer to a question she'd been asking with her body for days. My breath stilled. The shirt she wore was thin, almost translucent in the soft light, and it clung to her curves like a secret. Her hair was loose, falling down her back in waves that made me want to get lost. And her eyes, they were darker than usual. Wilder. "You came," she said quietly. I closed the door behind me. I couldn't not. Her lips parted like she wanted to smile or confess, or say something dangerous. But she didn't. She just stepped closer. One step. Two. And then her hands found my face, soft, reverent, like she wasn't sure I was real. "Do you know," she whispered, "how long I've wanted this?" I shook my head, breath shaky. "No. Since the first night. The moment you walked in. The way you looked at him. Like you wanted something so badly it hurt." My throat tightened. It did. She leaned in, forehead resting against mine. "Does it still?" "No," I breathed. "Not anymore." There was a beat, thick, silent, slow, and then her lips found mine. Soft at first. Testing. Asking. But when I didn't pull away, when I leaned into her with a need that had been hiding for far too long, the kiss deepened. And everything broke open. The world fell away. Time, names, guilt, consequences, none of it mattered. All that existed was the way her mouth moved with mine, slow and searching. The way her hand slid down my spine, pulling me closer. The way I clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a world I no longer understood. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Because our bodies were telling the story we hadn't dared to write until now. And in that story there was no him. Just her. And me. And the truth we'd been holding under our skin like a secret flame. I don't know how long we stood there, tangled in each other, mouths discovering, hands mapping. But I remember this. The way she whispered my name like it was a promise. The way I whispered hers back like it was a confession. And the moment she pulled me down onto the bed, slow and careful, like I was something precious, not stolen. Because in that room, under that moon, in her arms, I didn't feel like I was betraying someone. I felt like I was finally choosing myself. The room was quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet that comes after regret, but the soft kind. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket after a storm. My head rested against her shoulder, and her fingers moved slowly through my hair, like they weren't ready to let go of the moment. Neither was I. Her breathing was steady, warm against my skin. Outside, the lake was still. The stars had come out. And inside, I had finally come home to something I didn't know I was looking for. We didn't speak for a long time. There was no need to, because everything had already been said. In the way her lips trembled when I kissed her neck, in the way I pressed my face against her chest like I was hiding, in the way she held me when I trembled, not from fear but from release. When I finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "What happens now?" She was quiet for a beat. Her thumb grazed my cheek. "I don't know," she said. "But I know what I want." I pulled back just enough to see her face. "What?" "You." Without pretending. Without hiding. I looked down. The guilt hadn't disappeared completely. It lingered like smoke. But it didn't choke me anymore. It didn't control me. "I never thought I'd want this," I said. "Not like this. And now." I swallowed. "Now I don't want to let it go." She smiled. Slow. Radiant. Honest. "Then don't." But reality wasn't a dream you could just stretch into forever. Morning would come. So would the truth. And him. The person I was supposed to want. The person I had waited for. Until she took my hand. And now? Now I understood something that terrified me. I had never really been waiting for him. He was the story I thought I was writing. But she was the one who made me feel it. Hours passed. Morning light crept into the corners of the room like a slow exhale. I dressed quietly, kissed her once more, soft and lingering, and stepped into the hallway barefoot and different. He was in the kitchen when I came down, pouring coffee, looking over his shoulder with a smile. "Hey," he said, like everything was still okay. And maybe it was, but not in the way we thought. Because I smiled back. A real smile, one I hadn't worn in a long time. And I didn't rush to explain or hide or apologize for the person I was finally becoming. I just said, "Hey," and joined him at the table. And when she came downstairs a few minutes later, hair still messy, eyes still lit from something private, I didn't look away. And neither did she. He never asked what happened that night. And maybe he never will. But I'll always remember it. The night she took my hand before he did. And everything changed. Have you ever wanted something that you weren't supposed to want? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, subscribe. Because this isn't the only secret I have to tell.